Zen is sitting and breathing. High atop a pine-covered hill stood a small temple, home to an elderly Zen master. His life was simple: sweeping the garden at dawn, slowly preparing tea, and spending hours in silence, seated on a cushion facing the emptiness. One day, a young novice monk arrived at the temple, full of questions and eager spirit. His heart was restless, his mind crowded with thoughts, and his desire for enlightenment pushed him always toward the future. "Master," he said one day, bowing respectfully, "what is the true secret of Zen?" The old master did not answer right away. He simply looked at the boy with a calm that seemed to envelop everything. Then, with a gesture, he invited him to sit beside him on the tatami mat. The young monk obeyed. He sat down, crossed his legs as he had been taught, and waited for a profound teaching. Minutes passed. More minutes. Only the sound of the wind rustling through bamboo broke the silence. "And, Master," he finally whispered, "what is the secret?" The master exhaled slowly, as if the very breath held the wisdom. "Zen," he said softly, "is sitting and breathing, nothing more, nothing less." The young monk frowned. Was that all? Just sitting and breathing? But the master said no more. He simply closed his eyes and inhaled deeply once again. The young monk, a little confused, followed his lead, closed his eyes, and breathed. Air came in, air went out, and something barely noticeable began to shift within him. First, his breathing was erratic. He inhaled anxiously, exhaled hastily. His mind, restless like a caged monkey, jumped from thought to thought. Am I doing this right? How long should I stay like this? What if this doesn't work? But the master didn't move, didn't correct, didn't explain. He simply breathed. The young monk began to notice the sound of the wind more clearly, the creak of bamboo swaying, the distant caw of a crow. Each breath brought him closer to a silence that was no longer emptiness, but presence. A leaf fell beside him. It made no sound, yet the young monk heard it, not with his ears, but with the open attention of someone fully present. And then, for a moment, he did not think. Not about the past, not about the future, not even about Zen. There was only that moment, only his body, only the air flowing in and out. When he opened his eyes, the master was still there, motionless. But in his half-open eyes was a gentle smile, as if he knew exactly what the young monk had just discovered for himself. "Master," whispered the disciple, "for a moment, I thought of nothing. I just breathed." The master nodded slowly, as if confirming an eternal truth. Then, for a moment, he said, "You were free." That night, as the sky filled with stars and the crickets sang their ancient song, the young monk sat by the temple's pond. The moon's reflection trembled on the water, as if it too was breathing. He repeated the gesture, sitting in silence, letting his breath flow without trying to control it. Inhale, exhale. Nothing special, he thought, yet at the same time everything felt different. The night was not just night, it was presence. The air was not just air, it was life. And he was not a lost youth, he was simply someone breathing. The next day, while sweeping leaves from the garden, he remembered the master's words. Zen is sitting and breathing, sweeping and breathing, eating and breathing, walking and breathing. And slowly, he understood something deeper. Zen was not a technique reserved for the cushion, nor an enlightenment hidden away in the mountains. It was a way of being present, a silent attitude that turned every moment into a sacred temple. When he returned to the master, he did not ask for answers. He simply sat beside him in silence, like a rock beside the river. The master glanced at him sideways, saying nothing, and in that instant they both understood. The teaching had already been passed on, not with words, not with books, but with the breath shared in silence. As days passed, the young monk stopped chasing extraordinary experiences. Before, he had longed for visions, revelations, an absolute peace that would separate him from the world. But now he had discovered that true practice wasn't about escape, it was about being fully present in each moment, with the same focused attention as watching a flame flicker in the dark. One morning, while drawing water from the well, he heard the slow drip falling into the wooden bucket. Plop, plop. Each drop was like a bell calling him to the present. "Master, can I do Zen while I work?" he asked humbly upon returning. The elder, as always, answered simply, "When you breathe, you are alive. When you are present, you are awake. It doesn't matter if you're sweeping or walking among clouds. Zen isn't in what you do. It's in how you are while you do it." The young monk nodded. He remembered the days when he tried to meditate by counting breaths, forcing calm, struggling against thoughts. Now he simply let them drift by, like leaves carried along a river. One afternoon, while meditating beneath the cherry tree, a bee landed softly on his knee. He felt its vibration, its lightness, its brief breath, and he didn't move, not out of obligation but out of deep respect. He had understood that even a bee breathes Zen. The air kept flowing in and out, just as it always had. Only now, for the first time, he was present to notice. One gray morning, with the sky heavy and low-hanging clouds and the scent of wet moss in the air, the young monk accompanied the master on their daily walk through the forest. They said nothing. They just walked, step by step, breath by breath. Branches creaked beneath their feet, and now and then a crow's call broke the silence. At another time, the young monk might have felt the need to fill the quiet with words, questions, or thoughts. Now he simply listened. After a long while, they reached a clearing where moss gently covered the rocks. The master sat on one, and the young monk followed. They gazed at the horizon without hurry, as if the view itself was part of the practice. For years, the master finally spoke, as if reading the young monk's thoughts. "I walked these same paths burdened with an invisible weight. I believed I had to reach somewhere, to achieve something." He paused, while a breeze stirred the leaves. "One day I stopped, took a deep breath, and understood I was already home." The young monk lowered his gaze. The master's words were not new, but now they fell on fertile ground. "When you walk alone in the forest," the elder continued, "if you listen closely, everything teaches you how to breathe. The whisper of the trees, the murmur of the streams, even the silence between sounds." The young monk closed his eyes. He listened, felt his chest rise and fall. For the first time, he no longer wondered if he was doing his practice right. He no longer measured progress. He simply breathed, and that was enough. In that clearing, with no temples, cushions, or incense, he discovered that Zen was not a place to reach, but a state to return to. The days passed with the same serenity as the sun crossing the sky. The young monk no longer counted time or searched for signs. He simply lived each day like an empty bowl, without expectations, yet full of space to receive. One afternoon, while cooking rice in the temple kitchen, a cloud of steam rose from the pot. The young monk watched, fascinated. It lifted without shape, without resistance, dissolving into the air as if it had never been there. "That's how the mind is when we breathe," said a voice behind him. It was the master standing by the door. "It rises, it dissolves, and it returns to silence." The young monk nodded. He needed no more explanations. At night, he would sit on the terrace, wrapped in the song of crickets, gazing at the stars. He discovered that each breath connected him not only to himself but to everything that exists. The universe breathed with him. The bamboo breathed. The moon breathed. The silence breathed too. And amid that vastness, he realized something. He wasn't practicing to improve. He wasn't trying to reach anything. He was simply learning to be at peace, to be present, to be effortless. The master would watch him sometimes during those quiet nights and recognize in his posture the silent bloom of deep understanding, one that doesn't come from study but from being fully alive. Because, in the end, sitting and breathing was not a technique. It was an act of love toward life. One morning, just as the sun began to light the temple rooftops, the young monk stepped into the garden and sat beneath the eaves. There was no special reason. He wasn't seeking meditation or following a routine. He simply felt the urge to be there, still, awake. He inhaled the fresh morning air, exhaled slowly, and in that moment, he understood he no longer sought the perfect moment to practice. Everything was practice. Every instant, every breath, every silence. The master appeared with a steaming cup of tea. He sat beside him without a word. Together, they watched the steam rise, dancing in the air. Then the elder said, "Zen doesn't require effort, but it does require presence. Breathing doesn't need wisdom. It only needs you to be here." The young monk smiled, understanding. He no longer had doubts, not because every question was answered, but because they were no longer needed. His mind, once restless and full of questions, was now like the calm temple pond after rain. Later, when other anxious young monks arrived at the temple, he didn't offer grand speeches. He simply invited them to sit with him, to breathe, and so the silence spoke for itself. Some grew impatient and left. Others, like him, stayed. And one day, without quite knowing how, they too breathed with open hearts. Zen, after all, was not a hidden goal in the mountains nor a treasure reserved for a few. Zen was this, a simple moment, a mindful breath, a shared cup of tea at dawn. By the time autumn arrived, the leaves were turning gold and scarlet. The wind carried whispers of change, but at the temple, everything remained the same. The sweeping of leaves, the cawing of crows, the sound of the bell at dusk. The young monk, no longer so young, now sat where his master once sat. The old man had left one quiet morning, like a breeze slipping away without farewell. He left behind only a cushion, a warm teapot, and a lifetime of mindful breathing. He never said goodbye, but it wasn't needed. His presence lived on in every corner, in every slow step through the garden, in every pause before speaking, in every inhale and exhale that the disciple continued to nurture with reverence. And so, the new master did not declare himself a master. He simply remained there, sitting, breathing. One day, a little girl from the village approached shyly and asked, "What are you doing there, so still?" He smiled and replied with the same kindness he once received. "I am tending to the moment." "And how do you tend to a moment?" "You breathe," he said. "You are present." The girl sat beside him. She didn't fully understand, but she didn't need to. Together they breathed, while a leaf drifted down between them. In that instant, the practice continued, without pretense, without goal, without end. Because Zen is this, sitting, breathing, being part of everything.